Hi friends, I welcome you all here at TNV Academy. In this session, we are going to talk about an international standard ISO IEC 17021-1. Now let us start the clause 7 of the standard, that is resource requirements. Coming to the subclause 7.1, competence of personnel. The subclause 7.1.1 general considerations states that the certification body is required to have processes to ensure that personnel have appropriate knowledge and skills relevant to the types of management systems and geographic areas in which it operates. Some examples of management systems are environmental management systems, quality management systems, and information security management systems, food safety management systems, etc. Now let us talk about the subclause 7.1.2, determination of competence criteria. The subclause 7.1.2 of the standard specifies that the certification body must have a process for determining the competence criteria for personnel involved in the management and performance of audits and other certification activities. As per this subclause, competence criteria are required to be determined with regards to the requirements of each type of management system, standard, or specification. It must also be determined with regards to the requirements of each technical area and each function in the certification process. The output of the process must be the documented criteria of required knowledge and skills necessary to effectively perform audit and certification tasks to be fulfilled to achieve the intended results. Subclause 7.1.2 states that a certification body shall define the knowledge and skills for specific functions as specified under Annex A of the standard. Where additional specific competence criteria have been established for a specific standard or certification scheme, these shall be applied. Some examples of standards could be ISO, IEC, TS 17021-2, ISO, IEC, TS 17021-3, or ISO, TS 22003, etc. This subclause guides and suggests under a note that the term technical area is applied differently depending on the management system standard being considered. For any management system, the term is related to products, processes, and services in the context of the scope of the management system standard. As per this subclause, the technical area can be defined by a specific certification scheme, for example, ISO TS 22003, or can be determined by the certification body. It is used to cover a number of other terms such as scopes, categories, sectors, etc., which are traditionally used in different management system disciplines. Coming now to the subclause 7.1.3, evaluation processes. The subclause 7.1.3 states that the certification body is required to have documented processes for the initial competence evaluation. As per this clause, certification body must have documented processes for ongoing monitoring of competence and performance of all personnel involved in the management and performance of audits and other certification activities, applying the determined competence criteria. According to this subclause, the certification body must demonstrate that its evaluation methods are effective. The output from these processes must be identified personnel who have demonstrated the level of competence required for the different functions of the audit and certification process. Competence must be demonstrated prior to the individual taking the responsibility for the performance of their activities within the certification body. This subclause 7.1.3 guides under a note and refers to the Annex B of standard, containing a number of evaluation methods that can be used to evaluate competence. This subclause also guides under Note 2 to refer Annex C of the standard, showing an example of a process flow for determining and maintaining competence. Coming to the subclause 7.1.4, Other Considerations. As per this subclause 7.1.4, the certification body is required to have access to the necessary technical expertise for advice on matters directly relating to certification activities. It is also required for all technical areas, types of management systems, and geographic areas in which the certification body operates. The personnel of certification body can provide such advice, or it could be provided externally as well. Friends, let us now talk about clause 7.2 of the standard, that is, personnel involved in the certification activities. The subclause 7.2.1 of the standard states that the certification body is required to have sufficient competent personnel for managing and supporting the type and range of audit programs and other certification work performed. Coming to subclause 7.2.2 now. The subclause 7.2.2 says that the certification body is required to employ or have access to a sufficient number of auditors, including audit team leaders and technical experts, to cover all of its activities and to handle the volume of audit work performed. Now, the subclause 7.2.3. This subclause 7.2.3 simply says that the certification body is required to make clear to each concerned person about their duties, responsibilities, and authorities. Let me now talk about subclause 7.2.4. The subclause 7.2.4 of the ISO 17021-1/2015 specifies that the certification body must have processes for selecting, training, formally authorizing auditors, and for selecting and familiarizing technical experts used in the certification activity. The initial competence evaluation of an auditor must include the ability to apply required knowledge and skills during audits as determined by a competent evaluator, observing the auditor conducting an audit. This subclause further says that under a note that during the selection and training process described above, desired personal behavior can be considered. These are characteristics that affect an individual's ability to perform specific functions. Therefore, knowledge about the behavior of individuals enables a certification body to take advantage of their strengths and to minimize the impact of their weaknesses. Subclause 7.2.4 also suggests to refer to Annex D of the standard, which describes about desired personnel behavior that is important for personnel involved in certification activities. Coming to the subclause 7.2.5. The subclause 7.2.5 specifies that the certification body must have a process to achieve and demonstrate effective auditing, including the use of auditors and audit team leaders possessing generic auditing skills and knowledge. As well as certification body must also have a process to achieve and demonstrate skills and knowledge appropriate for auditing in specific technical areas. Let me now discuss about subclause 7.2.6. The subclause 7.2.6 of the standard specifies that the certification body is required to ensure that auditors and technical experts are knowledgeable of its audit processes, certification requirements, and other relevant requirements. The certification body must give auditors and technical experts access to an up-to-date set of documented procedures, giving audit instructions and all relevant information on the certification activities. Coming to the subclause 7.2.7. This subclause 7.2.7 says that the certification body must identify training needs and is required to offer or provide access to specific training to ensure its auditors, technical experts, and other personnel involved in certification activities are competent for the functions they perform. Now, let me talk about the subclause 7.2.8. As per this subclause, decision-making group or individual are required to understand the applicable standard and certification requirements and must have demonstrated competence to evaluate the outcomes of the audit processes, including related recommendations of the audit team. Decision could be like granting, refusing, maintaining, renewing, suspending, restoring, or withdrawing certification, etc. Expanding or reducing the scope of certification also falls under decision making. Coming to subclause 7.2.9, this subclause states that the certification body is required to ensure the satisfactory performance of all personnel involved in the audit and other certification activities. There must be a documented process for monitoring competence and performance of all persons involved. It should be based on the frequency of their usage and the level of risk linked to their activities. As per subclause 7.2.9, the certification body is required to review and record the competence of its personnel in the light of their performance in order to identify training needs in particular. Let me talk about the subclause 7.2.10. This subclause of the standard says that the certification body is required to monitor each auditor considering each type of management system to which the auditor is deemed competent. As per this clause, the documented monitoring process for auditors must include a combination of on-site evaluation, review of audit reports, and feedback from clients or from the market. This monitoring must be designed in such a way as to minimize disturbance to the normal processes of certification, especially from the client's viewpoint. Coming to the subclause 7.2.11. This subclause 7.2.11 states that the certification body is required to evaluate the performance of each auditor on site periodically. The frequency of on site evaluations must be based on need determined from all monitoring information available. Let us talk about the clause 7.3, use of individual external auditors and external technical experts. According to this clause, the certification body must require external auditors and external technical experts to have a written agreement by which they commit themselves to comply with applicable policies and implement processes as defined by the certification body. This clause says that the agreement must address aspects relating to confidentiality and impartiality and must require the external auditors and external technical experts to notify the certification body of any existing or prior relationship with any organization they may be assigned to audit. Subclause 7.3 guides under a note and states that use of an individual or employee of another organization individually contracted to serve as an external auditor or technical expert does not constitute outsourcing. Coming to subclause 7.4 of ISO 17021-1, that is personnel records. The subclause 7.4 says that the certification body is required to maintain up-to-date personal records, including relevant qualifications, training, experience, affiliations, professional status, and competence. As per this clause, this also includes management and administrative personnel in addition to those performing certification activities. Let us talk about the clause 7.5, outsourcing of ISO 17021-1 2015. This subclause 7.5.1 specifies that the certification body is required to have a process describing the conditions under which outsourcing may take place. The certification body is required to have a legally enforceable agreement covering the arrangements, including confidentiality and conflicts of interests, with each body that provides outsourced services. As per this clause, outsourcing is basically the subcontracting to another organization to provide part of the certification activities on behalf of the certification body. Coming to the subclause 7.5.2 now. The subclause 7.5.2 of ISO 17021-1 2015 specifies that decisions for granting, refusing, maintaining of certification, expanding or reducing the scope of certification, renewing, suspending or restoring, or withdrawing of certification must not be outsourced. Let me now discuss the subclause 7.5.3. According to this subclause 7.5.3, the certification body must take responsibility for all activities outsourced to another body. This subclause says that certification body is required to ensure that the body providing outsourced services and the individuals that it uses conform to requirements of the certification body and also to the applicable provisions of this part of ISO IEC 17021, including competence, impartiality, and confidentiality. As per this subclause 7.5.3, the certification body is required to ensure that the body that provides outsourced services and the individuals that it uses are not involved either directly or through any other employer with an organization to be audited in such a way that impartiality could be compromised. Coming to subclause 7.5.4 of the standard now. The subclause 7.5.4 states that the certification body must have a process for the approval and monitoring of all bodies that provide outsourced services used for certification activities. As per this subclause, certification body is also required to ensure that records of the competence of all personnel involved in certification activities are maintained. Subclause 7.5.4 guides and says under Note 1 that for subclause 7.5.1 to 7.5.4, where the certification body engages individuals or employees of other organizations to provide additional resources or expertise, these individuals do not constitute outsourcing provided they are individually contracted to operate under the certification body's management system. This clause under Note 2 specifies that for subclause 7.5.1 to 7.5.4, the terms outsourcing and subcontracting are considered to be synonyms. Friends, till now it was all about the clause 7, resource requirements of the ISO 17021-1 2015. I sincerely thank you for your interest and attention. Thanks and best wishes.